Holy shit, AMD actually listened to us and gamers as a whole. FSR 4.1 upscaling is officially coming to RX 7000 series graphics cards in July 2026, with support planned for RX 6000 series GPUs in 2027. After more than 8 months of stuffing around not releasing FSR 4 level technology for older GPUs, or even commenting on it in an official capacity, AMD have finally relented and made what is a very sensible decision to continue supporting their older Radeon products. What this means is that owners of RDNA 3 and eventually RDNA 2 graphics cards will not need to upgrade to an RDNA 4 GPU to access AMD's much better ML-based upscaling solution. Previously, from the launch of FSR 4 in March 2025 up until July 2026, FSR 4 upscaling has officially been exclusive to RDNA 4 RX 9000 series graphics cards. Owners of older cards based on RDNA 3 and RDNA 2 have been stuck on FSR 3.1, which we've shown is a much worse upscaling technology that is uncompetitive up against DLSS and FSR 4. Where things got complicated in this story is that back in August 2025, AMD accidentally published their own source code for FSR 4 that revealed a secret project that AMD was working on, FSR 4 upscaling using int8 instructions. They published this as part of the FidelityFX SDK 2.0 release and quickly removed it because they weren't planning to release the full open source code for FSR 4. Of course though, once things hit the internet, it's out there forever, and keen Radeon owners saved all the files just in case. The discovery of an int8 version of FSR 4 was massive because the officially released version of FSR 4 used FP8 instructions. FP8 instructions are newer and only supported in AMD's RDNA 4 architecture, whereas int8 instructions are supported in RDNA 4, RDNA 3, and RDNA 2. A version of FSR 4 that is built using int8 would then theoretically support older Radeon GPU architectures, not just the RX 9000 series. Less than a month after the source code was published, Reddit user AthleteDependent926 compiled an FSR 4 int8 DLL file for people to try themselves. As FSR 3.1 introduced the ability to upgrade FSR using DLL swaps, it became trivial to enable FSR 4 on RDNA 3 GPUs via a simple file swap to the int8 version in a given FSR 3.1 games directory. With a few additional driver tweaks, it was discovered this DLL also worked with RDNA 2 GPUs, though for whatever reason the latest drivers at the time were incompatible. Shortly after, we tested this version of FSR 4 int8 and found that it worked really well. At the start of October 2025, 7 months ago, we and other reviewers proved that not only does FSR 4 int8 work on RDNA 3 and RDNA 2 GPUs, but that it provided a huge boost to visual quality compared to FSR 3.1. It also looked very similar to the full FSR 4 FP8 implementation in a lot of scenarios, though there were some drawbacks in a couple of edge cases, largely when upscaling from low render resolutions. The downside to FSR 4 int8 was its performance overhead on RDNA 3 and RDNA 2 GPUs. Without access to FP8 and generally weaker AI performance, FSR 4 int8 was heavier to run on older cards and didn't provide as much of a performance boost compared to FSR 4 FP8 on RDNA 4 graphics cards. But I didn't feel like this was much of a concern because there was still a performance improvement to be had and the visual quality was miles ahead of FSR 3.1. In the conclusion to my video, I said, based on what I've seen today, there is no doubt that AMD should release the int8 version of FSR 4. For those with RDNA 3 and RDNA 2 GPUs, FSR 4 int8 would be the go-to choice for upscaling in modern titles. It would extend the life of those products and be a great way to support loyal Radeon buyers. But months and months passed without a peep from the Radeon division. We knew, and gamers knew, that FSR 4 support on RDNA 3 and RDNA 2 was possible because of this source code leak and subsequent testing. Despite us and many other media outlets repeatedly asking AMD where FSR 4 int8 was, the company remained silent. It got to the point where I was so annoyed at AMD for hiding this quality feature from gamers that I made a video 3 months ago blasting AMD for yet another Radeon blunder, this blunder relating to FSR 4 support. Where things got even more silly and made AMD look even worse is when Sony released PlayStation Spectral Super Resolution 2.0, or PSSR 2.0 for short, a truly awful acronym, and that was released for the PlayStation 5 Pro. PSSR 2.0 was released on March 16, 2026, and offered enhanced ML-based upscaling with significant visual improvements relative to PSSR 1.0. Shortly after, AMD released an updated version of FSR 4 called FSR 4.1. At that time, PlayStation 5 lead system architect Mark Cerny revealed that PSSR 2.0 is based on the same neural network as FSR 4.1. That's pretty neat, shared technology between Radeon and PlayStation. But the kicker came in an interview with Digital Foundry. Cerny revealed that PSSR 2.0 uses 8-bit integer instructions, aka int8 instructions, in contrast to FSR upscaling that uses 8-bit floating point. That's cool to know, but was a devastating blow for Radeon gamers because at this point, there was a complete picture of AMD's fumble. PSSR 2.0 used an int8 version of FSR 4.1 technology deemed good enough for Sony, but AMD refused to release FSR 4 int8 for RDNA 3 owners. Essentially, PlayStation 5 Pro gamers had access to this feature while Radeon gamers did not, even though it was proven months prior that it would work. This led to relentless and fair bullying of AMD. There were Reddit threads blasting AMD for not properly supporting people that had spent good money on previous generation hardware. We ran a poll 2 months ago on the issue, asking gamers whether AMD's lack of feature support for older GPUs, e.g. FSR 4, had impacted the chance they'll buy a Radeon GPU in the future. Of the 32,000 people that voted, 48% said that it made them less likely to buy a Radeon GPU in the future, while 10% said they definitely wouldn't buy Radeon because of this issue. That was a very bad result for AMD. 58% of people in our poll said their decision-making around Radeon GPUs had been impacted due to a lack of feature support. If gamers didn't feel the Radeon brand was trustworthy and that AMD wouldn't support their products long-term, why would they buy into the ecosystem? In contrast, Nvidia has done an excellent job of supporting older GPUs with new DLSS technologies. Earlier this year, Nvidia released DLSS 4.5 upscaling with 2 new AI models to choose from. This upscaler is available on all RTX GPUs, even those from the 20 series that were released way back in 2018. And while there is a sizable performance impact on Turing models relative to newer RTX 50 series GPUs, Nvidia still offers DLSS 4.5 as an option for people using older GPUs, in addition to previous DLSS models. The difference was stark. Nvidia supporting DLSS 4.5 back to the 20 series, and AMD not even bothering to support older Radeon cards with a version of FSR 4 that everyone knows will work. This was not the sort of move that wins over customers or market share, and the fact AMD wasn't making such an obvious move was baffling. So I'm kind of stunned to be sitting here reporting that FSR 4.1 is actually coming to RDNA 3 and RDNA 2. At every step of this journey, after every new revelation, it just seemed like AMD did not care whatsoever and would never release FSR 4.1 for older GPUs. But here I am in May 2026 looking at an official announcement of this very feature. It's late, very, very, very late, but I guess they say it's never too late to make the right decision. What can owners of RDNA 3 expect when FSR 4.1 reaches their GPUs? Well, according to AMD's Jack Huen, AMD has carefully tuned, optimized, and validated the FSR 4.1 model to work with int8 instructions. Specifically, they optimized memory usage, reworked motion vector validation, and reduced artifacts in fast-moving scenes to make sure performance stays smooth. He goes on to say, every millisecond mattered because if FSR took too long, it would defeat the purpose. This sounds to me like AMD have worked to improve the performance of the int8 model, potentially to make it run closer to the FP8 model on RDNA 4 without causing significant visual issues. Back when we tested the leaked FSR 4 int8 model, the quality was largely similar to the FP8 model, a huge win, but the performance cost was noticeable. Across the games I tested, it was common to see FSR 4 FP8 deliver a 10 to 20% higher performance boost on an RX 9070 XT than FSR 4 int8 on an RX 7900 XTX. The experience on RDNA 3 was definitely still playable and it still offered a performance uplift from upscaling, but to achieve a similar uplift as on an RDNA 4 card, you had to drop the quality mode by at least one additional tier, for example using balanced upscaling instead of quality upscaling. If AMD have been able to optimize the Intake model to run better on RDNA 3, hopefully the performance improvement from upscaling ends up even better than what we saw from the leaked model. Even just releasing the model as we tested it last year would be a win, but it would be a massive win if AMD can get the output similar to the FP8 model in quality and performance. This optimization process is also probably why AMD are holding back FSR 4.1 for RDNA 2 GPUs until 2027. Not that I think that's a great move, but it at least could explain what's going on. The leaked Intake model does work on RDNA 2 GPUs, but the performance overhead is pretty significant. In some cases, I found the uplift using FSR 4 Intake quality mode was negligible compared to native rendering on those cards. RDNA 2 just doesn't have the most powerful Intake capabilities, so hopefully AMD can get this model running better on RDNA 2 with further tweaks. What will be interesting to see though is how close FSR 4.1 for RDNA 3 is to FSR 4.1 on RDNA 4 in visual output, given that AMD are using the same name to describe both technologies. It is theoretically possible to run the exact same model using different instruction sets, with the instructions dictating performance rather than output quality, but to get the model running at acceptable speeds, it may be necessary to downgrade the model, which is what Intel did with XeSS and its two models. There's the higher quality XMX version for Arc GPUs and the lower quality but faster DP4A model for a broader range of GPUs. It's not clear where FSR 4.1 on RDNA 3 will land, of course, but based on what I've seen from the leaked model, I'm optimistic it will be largely the same as the full FP8 version. Outside of the performance and optimization stuff, it sounds like FSR 4.1 will operate on RDNA 3 GPUs in the same way as on RDNA 4, in that it's accessed largely through the driver override feature in Radeon software. This feature takes existing FSR 3.1 or newer implementations and automatically upgrades the upscaling solution to the latest version, which as of today is FSR 4.1. These days, the toggle is on by default for all supported games, which allows AMD to claim support in over 300 titles, but of course, you do have control on a per-game basis. FSR 4.1 will be a massive visual leap for owners of RDNA 3 GPUs. Whether we look at the FP8 version or the leaked Intake version compared to FSR 3.1, it's an enormous upgrade, especially at lower output resolutions like 1440p and 1080p. These days, FSR 3.1 is just not very good, its visual output is blurry, and has tons of visual artifacts like sizzling, grain, and shimmering. The latest DLSS models absolutely destroy FSR 3.1, it's a night and day difference when gaming at common resolutions like 1440p. FSR 4.1 is significantly better as well, to the point where FSR 3.1 doesn't even look like it's rendering the same resolution. The issue though, at the end of the day, is that AMD took way too long to release this feature on RDNA 3. Okay, fair enough to not release FSR 4 at the exact same time on RDNA 4 and RDNA 3 with two versions for FP8 and Intake, but it's going to have taken AMD 16 months to get FSR 4 onto RDNA 3 after the release of RDNA 4, which is completely unacceptable. This should have been at most a delay of a couple of months, or even better, FSR 4 Intake released as a beta version at the same time as the FP8 version while AMD finalizes optimizations. It's even less acceptable for AMD to take so long after everyone figured out that the Intake version is possible in August of last year. Why the 11-month delay after the source code was released? It surely can't take that long to optimize this version, especially when Nvidia seems to release entirely new DLSS models every year that they make work on all RTX GPUs. That's an absolutely ludicrous delay that I don't think will appease Radeon customers that said this issue has impacted their decision-making around buying Radeon cards. So it ultimately could be a case of too little too late for upset Radeon owners. Of course, it's always better to have access to FSR 4.1 at the end of the day, and I'm sure those with RDNA 3 GPUs will be happy to get this feature, but AMD needs to be much better about these sorts of things in the future. Long-term feature and game-ready driver support is crucial to a good custom experience, and this is something Nvidia has gotten right for a long time. You can't just dust your hands and go, oh well, this graphics card we released one generation ago is now outdated garbage that we don't need to support. You do need to support it and do your best to get things working unless there are genuine hardware limitations. There was never a genuine hardware limitation preventing FSR 4.1, or at least a decent version of it, from running on RDNA 3 GPUs, something AMD has now officially confirmed to be true. So anyway, that's it for our thoughts on this latest announcement. Yes, FSR 4.1 is finally coming to older Radeon GPUs, so we'll be testing that when it's available to see how it differs from at least the FSR 4.1 version that you can get currently on RDNA 4, but also that in-tape version that we tested a while back. It'll be interesting to see if there are any differences and changes there. Though, of course, I think that in-tape model was built around FSR 4. Now I've got FSR 4.1, so I guess I would be expecting some differences, but we'll test all of that out later. If you do want to support Hardware Unboxed and the testing that we do have Patreon. Links to that is in the description below. If you want to sign up, you can do so. You get access to things like our Discord community, monthly live streams, behind the scenes content, lots and lots of good stuff in there. So thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.